You've been together 40 years.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
But use 35. I don't want folks to get pissed.
Or jealous.
You can tell them I'm trying to work on 36.
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yep, I hear you.
Nine. We're streaming live. We'll begin in 1 minute.
Oh, you sound very low now.
Tone?
Yeah, it's low now for me.
Is that better? Is that better, D?
Yeah, it's a little better, yes.
Okay.
You were better before when we were speaking offline, but
Right,
yeah, I
before
can
you
hear
were
you.
live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. D, you're fine. How am I audio?
Good.
Okay.
Okay, good. Bill, you're much better now. That's good.
Okay, great. All right, let's get started. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Smith. Welcome to PDA. PDA is a digital series on navigating workforce behaviors and workplace environments in today's marketplace. Our purpose is to engage audiences, coach, mentor professionals, connect ethnically and generationally, offering actionable strategies for success. Today, we are pleased to have Dr. D back with us after traveling all around the country and the Caribbean. We welcome her for our monthly presentation. This month, we're having a National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month presentation, and we're pleased to have Dr. D and a special guest here to give this special presentation. I'd like to start off and say that if you or someone you know is having an issue at this particular time, please encourage them to call 9888. Okay? This is also a special presentation for me. It was just about 2 years ago this month that I got that knock on the door. Police were at my door. My younger brother had unfortunately overdosed in New York Penn Station. It was shock, a lot of grief, a lot of guilt, a lot of sorrow, feelings for my poor mother. At that particular time, me and my brother had been through decades of drama, identity theft, bad loans. He had tried to reach out, I guess, about 8 weeks before he had passed. And I wasn't there. I didn't want to deal with him, guys. I got to be honest. It was just so much, drama with him each and every time. And then, of course, he was gone. So it was really a period of sorrow and grief. You feel like a waste. But I do remember, I had to go back and remember, the good days, the care and love that my mother gave to both of us, that, she wished for the both of us, try to seek forgiveness, but it was a lot of grief. So I hope to get some information on some, hope and recovery for all concerned who may have experienced someone who died by overdose like my brother, or who has committed suicide like some of the people who are be sharing their experiences today. So on behalf of a PDA group, welcome, thank you, and we're going to introduce the panel and get started. I'll be back with some facts, and Dr. D and Joseph will start the presentation today. Thank you and welcome.
So thank you for that, Bill. I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing our guest speaker for today. Please join me in welcoming Joseph D. Feaster Jr., a longtime Boston attorney, civic leader, advocate for mental health. He serves on the advisory board of the Samaritan Inc., supporting suicide prevention and programs for individuals living with mental illness. After the loss of his own son to mental illness, Joseph also founded the Feaster Family Foundation to combat stigma and expand access to mental health resources. His work has been highlighted in outlets like WBUR and through partnerships with institutions such as Brigham and Women's Hospital. Beyond his professional and advocacy work, Joseph is a devoted husband to his wife Phyllis of 35 years, a proud father to his daughter Alana, and an even prouder grandfather to his grandson Jaden. And on a personal note, I also happen to share his birthday, and he is my uncle. So thank you very much, Uncle, for joining us and talking about this very important subject, one that obviously has impacted our family. Um, and thank you for taking up this topic as part of your mission and using what we've experienced to help so many other people. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and you know how much I love you. Now, did I miss anything, Uncle?
Not at all in charge of what you want to do. I have my handkerchief here for I thought I may need as Dr. D and I began our conversation, but with that type of introduction from my birthday niece, my favorite niece. Now, again, I'm gonna start mess because others that may be watching or say, but they already know because I say it all the time. I'm almost like your grandmother. Your grandmother used to tell everybody I'm her favorite child.
Right.
So therefore, I just followed her footsteps and I put you in there as my favorite niece. But thank you so much to you and Bill, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with Dr. D, particularly since this is National Suicide Month. And so, as they say, let's get it on.
Absolutely. Bill?
Great. Thank you. So again, this is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. That's the reason why we're here with this particular presentation. Again, anyone you know suffering, having an issue with mental health right now, please, we encourage them to call 988. National Public Health Emergency. We're at a 40-year high in this crisis. Do something, vote, fiscal year 2026 budget. Suicide prevention can't wait. Here's some stats to look at as it relates to the number of individuals who are having thoughts of suicide, made plans for suicide, attempted suicide. Staggering. I also want you to take a look at some of the suicide rates by state. Look at the state where you grew up. Look out west. Look in middle America. Look on the East Coast. Look how the numbers rise in middle America in the South. Here's some information on suicide rates by race in the United States. Of course, the American Indians and the Alaskans have the biggest problem with this crisis, followed by white America, Black America, Hispanics. Here's something that's staggering as well. Suicide rates by age. You'll note the number of young people who are also killing themselves is just staggering. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. We must, do all that we can with some programs and services to help the youth and stop with this bullying and shaming of the youth. Here's some information on the highest suicide rates by occupation, transportation, management, maintenance, repair, occupation, construction, extraction, and occupations, protective service occupations. So think about some of the people you know, some of the stress that they're under at home and at work. Let's give them some consideration. I'm now going to turn this over to Dr. D. We'll go through the last of these slides a little bit later as they give you this very detailed and informative information and presentation on suicide prevention and awareness. Dr. D and Joseph, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you so much, Karis. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. D, Dr. Darlene Williams, and I'm President and CEO of Darlene Williams Consulting and Restoring Bountiful Joy. And our goal and mission is to do exactly what we're doing now, to bring awareness, recovery, healing, and hope to individuals who are experiencing some of life's challenges, and that includes thoughts of suicide and acts of suicide. I want to start first by saying thank you to Bill and to Joseph in advance for sharing your testimony. And that's what I call it, your testimony and your story, because as we all go through the journey of grief and loss, and we know that grief and loss is not exclusive of people who die by suicide, but it's also missing a person or a thing. It takes bravery to have this conversation and to really share what you've experienced. But I believe that our stories have power, and it's in sharing of our stories, sharing of our journeys, that someone else can be helped and find healing. Bill, you also said something very important in your stats. I don't know if you realized it, but you mentioned thoughts of suicide. And that's what we see on the screen now. There's one thing that we learned for those of you who have not yet taken a mental health first aid class. It's free across the country. And when mental health first aid is administered, it teaches us to ask that very direct question. Do you have thoughts of suicide, but do you have a plan? Do you have a plan? And if someone has a plan, that is an immediate red flag. And you see the third column in the middle is highlighted red, for us to think about ways to keep them safe, and to provide help and assistance. So I just want to share that. So Bill, I don't know if you nuggets out there, but thank you for doing that, starting our conversation off well. Joseph, I am excited to talk with you. I know that this is something that is near and dear to your heart as well. And it's near and dear to my heart also, because when we think about suicide and thoughts of suicide, there definitely is a mental health component that we can't separate from that. So if you would just start by introducing yourself. I know Karis told your wonderful, wonderful introduction from your favorite niece, but talk to us about your journey with suicide, in your family, and why this is such an important topic for you, and why you are seeking and working so strongly on advocacy for suicide prevention.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. D, and certainly it's my pleasure to meet you. You're with my family, my niece and my nephew, Bill, and my niece, Karis. Um, I think the best way to start is I like to put things in context so people will know how I arrived at where I am now, having mental health and suicide as my ministry. Uh, the where I have two children, and I still speak of my son Joseph III in terms of the present. Um, I would just say at the outset, his death by suicidal, as they say now, unlived, he was 27 years old. Uh, Joseph was born in 1983, and wonderful young person. In fact, he was the apple of the family's eye because I had two sisters. My sisters, Karen had three daughters. My sister Ponder, which Karis is a product of that, had two daughters. No, and I'm the one that had a daughter first, Alana, and then Joseph the third. So when he came, it was like the baby Jesus with the Exodus for folks to come and visit with him. Um, and so Joseph developed, went to went to schools because we were here in Massachusetts. Went to schools in fact, he participated in a program called Medco, which is allowed uh, persons living in Boston to attend suburban school systems. And so he attended that from the first grade all the way through high school. And fine, He played sports, was academically inclined. In fact, he was a student marshal when he graduated from high school. Went off, and one of the things while we were looking around for colleges, I had two rules. One was you couldn't go west of the Mississippi, you couldn't go south of Virginia, and yeah, you can go north. I didn't want him to go to Vermont or Maine necessarily, but he was to go north of Massachusetts. So originally, Joseph had determined that he wanted to do something in terms of film. So we principally looked at two schools, and he took the time to investigate it and we took a trip down to NYU in New York to the Tisch School.
Mm-hmm.
And he also had mentioned at the University of Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh, and the University of Pitt, as they call it, in Pittsburgh. And we went there, and I was so impressed with the University of, uh, of Pittsburgh, and the fact that you could matriculate at Carnegie Mellon, and it was just a beautiful this hall of flags that they had up there. And I was hoping, I said, "Oh, please, I hope he'll say he wants to go here," which he did. And he matriculated there for the first year. And then when he came home for that summer, he started to was acting. I just use the terminology. He was acting different. He was acting strange, and doing and saying different things as well. And one day, because I had him staying now that he was 19 years old and grown, I allowed him to stay in one of my apartments in Boston. He didn't have to come and live at home with me, but he stayed in one of my apartments there. And one day I went by there, and opened it up. His eyes were, big as anything. He jumps up, he attacks me. I close the door. I go downstairs. I'm crying like a baby.
Mm.
But I also was familiar with something called Section 12. That's we have. I don't know if that's a national thing, but here Section 12 in Boston, whereby I suggest to all our viewers that when you are going to call for uh, first responders, particularly the police, you want to be aware that make them aware that a person is having a mental health episode, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times if they come, the person is so agitated they may have some type of weapon or something in their hand, and I can tell you somebody is going to get hurt in that exchange. So I knew through the Section 12. I called his primary care. I knew about the Section 12. Plus, I'm very involved in the politics in Boston, so I knew some of the higher ups in the police department, etc. So I closed the door. I'm crying like a baby. I called my wife, um, and so what they sent was a special ops units to my house. They come, they break down the door, bring him out. They have him hogtied, and I mean literally hogtied. Take him. They take him down to an institution called the Boston Medical Center. Um, Went down to the Boston Medical Center, and I said to Joseph, "Do you know that, what happened?" "No." "Did you know that you attacked me?" He said, "I attacked you, Dad." They had no clue that he had done that. Fast forward, um, what what then happened is, I they were going to transport him to a secure facility because the hospital didn't have a secure facility. So they went ahead, transported him there. And I said to him, "Listen, when you tell him that he's going to have to go to this secure facility, he is going to act out," which he did. They had to bring him back at 3 o'clock in the morning. I get a call. They had to bring him back to the hospital. I see him the next day. The side of his face the skin was removed from the side of his face because I've obviously they tried to restrain him, hold him down, etc. Um, so that was one of three incidents that I had, and I'll talk quickly about the other two just to show the experience that we oftentimes have to go to. Because I only had three experiences, whereas many people they have multiple experience throughout the course of a week. So I can almost say, from a standpoint, we were fortunate only to have these three episodes. That was the one that was there when he returned from school. And I'll just suggest to folks as an aside, in dealing with the University of Pitt, I I got a bill from him that said he had to, they had to do some special cleaning in his room. So I just figured, I said, oh, okay, guy away from college, he wasn't going to have to, wasn't tidy, etc. Well, what I subsequently learned is that he may have had episodes out there for which they weren't telling me, because the schools have this thing of, well, these are adults. We don't have to tell the parents anything,
Yes.
etc. And what I told him, even at the time when we were out there for the orientation and all, I looked at him and said, you better tell these people I'm paying the bill, that they better communicate with me with his grades and all, because they were saying they wouldn't do that. So what I made the school do, because his grades had declined during a period of time and he was an excellent student, I would just tell you that's where my legal skills came into play. I got them to return the tuition for that year, because I said, you didn't educate my son based upon his condition. The second incident that I had, and I'm fast forwarding now, was Joseph was very able, very intelligent, computerized, etc., and had when he graduated from college, what he did was to get in fact, well, when he was at the University of Pitt, when he came home that year, I kept him home a year. I kept him home in a year, and he worked. And so I sat down with him and I said, what do you want to do? He said he would like to go back to the University of Pitt. Well, his mother and his sister were not in agreement with that, but I didn't want to be in a situation where I didn't allow him to fulfill his dream. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Again, lawyer and me, father to son, contract. I said, fine, I'll pay for you to go back to University of Pitt. I said, but I only pay for A's and B's. If that isn't accomplished, then you have to come back here, attend school back here in Massachusetts. Well, he got A's and B's, but not all A's and B's, and that was the contract. So he was at University of Pitt for those 2 years. He came back, went to University of Massachusetts, Boston, graduated from there. He was the statistician for a good friend of mine, Charlie Titus, who was the athletic director. He was the statistician for all the teams at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Went on and was admitted into the initial class of the college master's program for entrepreneurial technology, because I indicated he wanted to go into business. He was in that program, and then in January of 2010, he was on a call with his classmates, etc., and there was someone on the call who had had some medical experience. He realized that something was going on with Joseph, so he called the teacher and said, listen, I think you maybe want to send somebody over, for a welfare check. They go to the house, because I have a 3-family. I have tenants there. Tenant opens up the door. Joseph is now in a manic state. What he does is he jumps out of the third floor window with a samurai sword in the middle of and this is in Roxbury, which is a Black community in Boston. Runs down the street, and I heard that police cars were coming from every direction. They cornered him on the street not far from where the house was, surrounded by police. He has his samurai sword, guns drawn, etc. But this lieutenant tackled him, and so that he was spared or saved. God was with him that particular time frame. Took him again to the hospital, did that. The third time was when, in fact, the death by suicide, because he was having some issues. A neighbor of mine saw him that earlier that particular day. He went and he jumped from that same window that he had jumped from before that January, and this was in August 3rd, 2010. Jumped from that window, death by suicide, and that started my journey in getting very much involved in the mental health community, involvement with NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, getting involved with the Samaritans, getting involved with the Massachusetts Association of Mental Health, and now I speak to groups, and I speak to it as a caregiver, because I'm not a clinician. I can't give folks advice. I can give them what tools I use, but that's how I came to this particular space. So I think I wanted to give that journey, Dr. D, to let folks know, and I'm surprised I haven't shed a tear yet, because I'm thinking, speaking about this from a theoretical standpoint and distancing myself from it. But if I start crying, folks, that's all right. I'll recover, and I'll be fine. So back to you, Dr. D.
Joseph, I just want to, before we even go any further, I just want to again say thank you so much for taking us through your journey, and for explaining it to the viewers so vividly. That's difficult, right? It's hard to talk about this topic, and we'll discuss some of the reasons why, but it's definitely difficult to talk about it when it's your family member, but let alone your son, your child. So I commend your bravery. I commend your transparency and your passion for this work, because you are helping so many people on this call right now. I loved how you said that this was your ministry, because I'm one that, I believe that God doesn't waste our pain, right? In a way of saying that, because we go through for other people, and you are an ambassador, for your family and for everyone on this call. Again,
Amen.
I just want to say thank you for that. Um, for those who are listening, Joseph mentioned Massachusetts Section 12, and just want to, tell you what that is. So Section 12 refers to the process for the emergency involuntary restraint and transportation of a person to a mental health facility for evaluation due to risk of serious harm from their mental illness. So that other states have similar laws, but that's Section 12 in Massachusetts. So I know this journey has really shaped your view and your advocacy on mental health. And mental health is sometimes difficult to talk about. And I know we have on the screen the Institute for Mental Health, which helps us with people who are having thoughts of suicide. So, as we're having this conversation, if anything triggers anyone, if you are with a person that is triggered and you need assistance, please stop and call 988, which is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Seek support, seek help, speak to someone that may be in the house with you. But if this conversation is triggering, or you're having some thoughts of suicide, or you need to speak to someone for counseling or coaching, please stop and call 988 or call 911. So, Joseph, how has going through this journey and the different things you talked about the three incidences, how has that shaped your perspective on mental health in our community? Because, and I say our community because people of color is what I'm speaking to. Because if you think back to the statistics that Bill showed, we saw two very distinct groups of people of color. And Bill, if you can take us back to that slide, that'd be great, or Karis. How has this shaped your view and the conversations that you have as you go across talking about suicide in different communities?
Well, the first thing that you come in, and I want to add to some of the statistics, because I uh, I I think data is important for people to know, particularly as we say in this space, you're not alone. And I'm glad that you gave the 988 number. We are here in Massachusetts, through the organizations I'm involved with, we deal a lot with the youth. So we have the youth. We know that young people deal with texting, so we have a text number as well that we use, and it's for us. It's called Hey Sam. The text number is 43972-726. And you have, sometimes they prefer, they want to do it that way, or you can use the 988 number, and there are persons on the line that you can speak to. But I want to give some other statistics that amplify what Bill showed in the slides that he has on the screen now, and he showed previously. 3 people attempt suicide every minute in the United States. 1 in 5 high school students seriously consider attempting suicide. Up to 135 people are affected by a suicide loss. So it is significant, and the ages are getting younger and younger. And the pandemic created that. We have it from from youth to our seniors are being affected by suicide. And this chart here gives you the ages by rates, over the course of from 2000 to 2015. It
Yes.
shows you what in terms of the rates. What I have found is this, Dr. D, the system is broken. The system is broken because behavioral health or mental health is not treated the same as physical health. It's not treated by persons who are treated by cancer, liver disease, heart disease. There's nothing comparable. And it seems like our society is just coming to the conclusion that the brain is an organ because that's where the stigma derives from. The stigma derived because when a person is going through through a mental health crisis, they may act out. I always say to a person that if I was to fall on the ground and just was laying there, one would be say, "Oh, give them air, stand around them, let's call 911." Well, if I did the same thing, ripping off my clothes, running around trying to be naked, folks are going to be backing up. They're going to be calling 911 and they're going to be calling for a different, they aren't calling for the medical folks, they're calling for the security folks in terms of our police force. So that's one
Correct.
of the things that our society has yet to come to grips in a meaningful way. They're getting better that the brain is definitely an organ. The second thing we have, particularly in the Black community, is we don't want to confront the issue in terms of persons that are suffering any type of mental illness or any ideations of suicide because they see it's the macho thing, and that's true even in the Hispanic community and in the Black community. That in terms of define, you aren't exposed to exhibit any of these things which may show that you are lesser, particularly as it pertains to Black males. And the suicide rate is high amongst Black males, but ever increasing in terms of Black women as well as our Black elders. And the last piece
Mm.
that I'd say that I've come to understand is there just aren't sufficient number of Black professionals in the space like you, Dr. D. So even if one was looking to find resources, and I'm well connected here in Boston. I've lived in Boston now 57 years, and I want everybody to know I'm a New Yorker through and through. Born in the Bronx, raised in Queens, worked in Brooklyn, partied in Manhattan. And I make sure all my Boston folks know that. But nonetheless, I've been here 57 years. I've been involved in the community. And so as a result of that, as they say, I know people. And even with that, in the medical profession, as my niece had pointed out with Beth Israel, Mass General Hospital, those are some of the major institutions in the country. I was not able to find the adequate resources to deal with my son's situation. And that was primarily because
Mhm.
at 19 years old, he's an adult. So I could not influence what the decision were. And under the HIPAA rules, they don't even have to talk to me unless he was to say that. In fact, when he had that first incident that I mentioned, where he was at Boston
Mhm.
Medical Center, I had my law partner go in and get me a temporary guardianship so I could try to influence his treatment. I can tell you
Mm.
that that temporary guardianship provided me no solace or capability in a meaningful way to be able to address my son's treatment. So those are the things that as a caregiver you go through, and it is difficult for us to be able to determine it. Just like this slide here, with how do you know it when you see it? How do you know when one may be going through an experience? Some people suffer with schizophrenia. Some people suffer with depression. Most of us can't identify that, and oftentimes it's too late.
Right, right. No, absolutely. And you made some very great points. One, I want to, speak to the point about the statistics we see related to suicide is pre-COVID, and COVID definitely exacerbated suicide and suicide thoughts. We've seen so much isolation between the years of 2020 and 2023. The levels and the isolation that people experience really helped to make suicide more of an issue, but also something that we weren't paying attention to. Because if you think about it, people that had to stay home and not leave their house for 2 to 3 years, that may not have always been a healthy thing to do, right? There could have been trauma, and Bill had the slide up about some of the causes of suicide, trauma in the home, family history of mental illness, poverty, discrimination, racism. So as you isolate yourself, that increases your risk of suicide. We've also seen a risk in the Black community and Hispanic community for our younger generation. So we've seen a risk for people ages 10 to 24, 25 to 44, and then our seniors, what you mentioned, age 65 and up. And people wonder why our seniors, and when you think back to isolation that we just talked about, a lot of seniors are isolated when they turn 65. Either their spouse is no longer with them, their children have moved on, they have their own families, they're living alone, their lifestyle has changed, they've retired from the only job that they've known their entire life. So that isolation and that loneliness sets in, and we see increased risk of suicide. If you can take us to the slide where some of the characteristics that we just talked about that you may be able to notice, because I think, Joseph, you made a good point. When we see some of these things, we may not recognize them as signs or warnings of suicide or a warning that a mental illness can be ensuing. So,
Bill, you may, excuse me for a minute, Dr. D. You may want to go back to the previous slide, Bill. That's the one with the suicide risk factors. I think that's the
okay.
one Dr. D wants.
Yes, that one. Thank you. Family mental illness, prolonged stress, access to lethal means, history of trauma. But one thing you also mentioned is when you're having these risk factors, being able to identify a caregiver, a clinician that is culturally competent and someone that you can relate to is more and more challenging. When I used to work in the city, one thing that we started was a mental health first aid program, but it was because it was so difficult to find clinicians that can relate to you. I was looking for a clinician for someone in my family not too long ago. They had very specific characteristics that they wanted for this clinician because of mental illness. Can you believe that when I called, I had an 8-month waiting time for my
Mm.
family member to see a clinician? Anything could have happened over that 8-month period. So, that speaks to the stigma, because a lot of times we don't reach out when we need help. When we have a headache, we're having a heart problem, or we're coughing, we go to the doctor. But when it comes to mental health concerns, there's a stigma attached. So why do you think, in your experience, Joseph, and your travels and your expertise, that there's such a stigma around having conversations related to mental health? And we're looking at some of the risk factors and the mental health issues that can lead to suicide. Why do we have such difficulty talking about it?
Well, just think about it. I would say within the past 20 years is when our society began to talk about, as I stated earlier, seeing the brain as an organ that needed to
Yes,
be addressed. Up until that time, uh, folks were described as weird, different. Why are they acting like that? And people didn't want to have a conversation about it because it impacted them adversely on their places of employment, at their
absolutely.
places for school, amongst their social colleagues. So no one knew what it was because it wasn't much talked about. It was a hush hush. And if you had it, people were losing their jobs as a result of it. And now we have situations where there is some protection throughout, in many of the states, is not all of the states, whereby people are protected through various programs. We have employers have programs to deal with this, through their insurance programs. We have it in terms. I was just involved with a law organization which deals with the program for lawyers. So there's a recognition that people may be going through, and some of the factors we talk about here, person may lose their job, and that may be a trigger of
Yes.
it. I just recently, and I want to I'm going to do a little promotion here. And I'm also, Bill, I'm just going to take a little liberty here and suggest to our viewing audience, if they have questions, put it in chat so we can address some of them. But I want to put up, I'm reading a book by Ricky Smiley. Everyone likes notable people. He's a comedian, etc. I'm reading his book, Sideshow, Living with Loss and Moving Forward with Faith. He's talking about the loss of his son, Brandon. I definitely encourage you to pick this book up. It is a very simple read, but it is so prophetic in a lot of different ways. And as a male, I can definitely relate to his relationship with his son, how he came through it, how he was one who paid, who did things with his son all during his life, and his son just he told his son to go right, his son went left. It happens, folks. So the one thing that I always say to when I'm speaking as a caregiver is to say, do not do the blame game. My 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 cousin or nephew, I'm not sure now the family relationship, but I think it's in terms of nephew. Bill was talking about with his brother. When he experienced what his brother had, he felt a sense of guilt and not being there, etc. I tell him, get rid of that. You could have
Yes.
done nothing to change the circumstances in terms of the addiction that was driving your brother, my nephew, in order to that state of mind. So therefore, I say to folks, let's move on from there. And maybe you want to get with support groups. They have support groups for persons. Way I deal with it is to be involved in the in the business and the education of mental health. Other people need support groups to be able to talk about other persons who have experienced it. Find your niche as a caregiver in order what works for you. But I want you to definitely dispel the idea that you may be at fault, that you could have done something to prevent it. And even Ricky Smiley talks about that he felt that sense of guilt, but he's moved on from there. So that's where I think the stigma issue has come into play, because society still hasn't come to full grips and wanted to treat behavioral health and the same as they treat physical health.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
absolutely.
And remember, it was, hundreds of years ago, suicide was, a noble act, right? If you did something like this hundreds of years ago, it was either for, war or, something of valor. Um, Whole lot of things going on for something like this. And that's why, I was encouraging people to, if nothing else, be a little bit more kind. You don't know what people are going through. And sometimes you might need to check.
Yeah. And that leads me to the last question I want to ask you, Joseph, before Bill and Karis open it up to questions. Bill, very good segue once again. As we honor Suicide Prevention Month, what's one thing, as people are listening today who may think, okay, this relates to someone in my family. I've seen some signs. I'm not sure. They're starting to second guess. What's one thing that we can do today to make our circles safer, to make them more open, and to make them more life affirming, so that our loved ones, people in our space, people in our circle, they feel comfortable? It may not happen overnight, but it's a daily process, right? It's a journey. So what can we do as individuals, like Bill said, be kinder, to make our circles safer for people to talk and to open up?
Well, and again, Bill did make a good segue to, and your uh, grabbing onto that, Dr. D, got me to what a document I have here from Samaritans, which talks about the conversation guide.
Yes.
And I think what's important is for us to recognize what people are fearful to have the conversation about it. They're fearful to, if they see someone that may be going through something, they want to say, I don't know if I should ask that question. How should I go about it? So I'm going to give you we call it the open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be, don't be fearful to approach the person, because sometimes that's going to get them to be thinking about how they may be able to address the particular issue and also to go for help.
Right.
Because you may not be in a position, but you may be able to get them to that space. So you may say, conversation. How long have you been feeling this way?
Right.
How bad do these feelings get? How do you think this will affect, and go into a number of things? How are you coping? How are you handling this? How have you dealt with these feelings up until now? Uh, how has the loss of whatever been for you? So, in essence, what this is saying, just have a conversation, because what you're showing is some empathy and some concern for the person. Now, I can recall when I first started on this journey, shortly after my son's passing on August 3rd, 2010, I was at my church and I was having a conversation around mental health and suicide. And I still recall a woman was there, and we were chatting. I was telling my story, as I've done here this evening. And she said, well, I thought my son was being lazy, not getting up for work or not getting up for school. Uh, and what she realized as we went through the discussion, what he was suffering from was depression. And she had no way of really, in terms of knowing that, if she had started, but as opposed to leaving him, the room is all dark, he wasn't getting up, etc., recognize that that's some of the risk factors that we're talking about. And Bill, you're right, the suicide warning signs and the changes in a person's behavior. Person may start using drugs or alcohol. They may start to be in a situation where they were a quiet person and they're talking a lot. The other thing that oftentimes happen, folks become very sexually active.
Absolutely.
All of these things are exhibited in some of the behaviors. So I guess what I would leave with before we go to opening up for questions, Dr. D, is to say to folks, have the conversation with the person. Don't be fearful that you're going to some way embarrass them, some way, yeah, they may even act out, but you should demonstrate your concern by asking the types of questions, suggesting to them, because you're not going to be able to demand that they go, but to suggest to them that there are places they can go to. You can give them the hotline numbers, 988. That's a national number. They created that about a year or two ago or more. You can go to text. I said 439-726. Look for the resources. Go online for the National Alliance for Mental Illness. Go on the line for, Samaritans. They will reach out, they will have the conversation. If someone is in an immediate manic or distressed state, call that number 988. And sometimes folks have been successful in, if literally, walking folks off the ledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joseph. I really appreciate all your transparency, but also your expertise and your knowledge. And Bill, same to you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I don't know, Bill and Karis, are there any questions in the chat?
So
I don't see any.
I have some questions here.
Oh, great.
Um, so, Mr. Feaster, can you tell us more about your role with Samaritan and the impact of their work in suicide prevention?
Yes. Several things. Well, first and foremost, several organizations. Where I first began the journey was uh, at well, you were there, in fact, at Joseph's memorial service, and that was August 10th, 2010. Um, and what I asked folks to do was to contribute to an organization called the Mass Association for Mental Health, which was brought to my attention by a person who I call my sister, Colette Phillips. And I was trying to find an organization to do that. Well, we were, if you will, raise $6,000 from that memorial service, and I gave it to this place called Lindemann Center, which was to help young people who were experiencing mental health issues. And so that started my involvement with the Mass Association of Mental Health, which I am now on the executive committee. I've served in there now for 15 years and given money, have received recognition by them, put in the time, served on various committees. So what we do is we go in legislation, and I just want to add here, we look at mental health very broadly. It could be affected by people's housing situations, it could be affected by people's medical situations. So when we lobby both on our state capital and in the federal government, we're looking at it holistically, trying to address it. So that's what I do with Massachusetts Association for Mental Health. Um, as far as Samaritans, I am involved with them, and I have the Feaster team. We've participated in a 5K walk. I deal with a breakfast for hope with them. I serve on the advisory council for Samaritans. I speak at events on behalf of Samaritan. In fact, I brought the material to an event that I was the moderator for a panel on men's wellness and mental health this past Saturday, and I bring the information to them. So I'm committed to providing the education and the resources to caregivers to tell them what they
Right.
can do. I can also direct people, oftentimes through those organizations, they can find clinicians, they can find some people, they can find persons culturally competent. There's another organization called InnoPsych, which is an organization of Black psychologists and psychiatrists. So we want to bring the resources, we want to be helpful. And I say to folks, hey, put in the time. If you're experiencing it amongst your family, friends, associates, colleagues, etc., put in the time. Put some resources toward, I call it the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. That's what I
Yes.
give when I'm involved with an organization. And oftentimes people don't do that, but I think that I found it rewarding to get involved with those organizations, as I said, to make this my ministry.
Yes,
Thank,
absolutely.
thank you. I have another question I think is both to you, Uncle, and Dr. Williams. How do I deal with my sibling that repeatedly uses the threat, "I'm going to hurt myself," as an attention-seeking technique?
I'm
Jo-
I'm gonna give that to Dr. D. She's closer to the clinician side. I'd have my own views, but I think I would want to hear hers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would first definitely want to acknowledge what the person is saying, what your sibling is saying, and definitely seek to see if they can get some support and some assistance because although we may have one opinion of what it is, we really cannot be sure of what someone is thinking, of what they're saying. It may seem like the conversation comes up at a time where there's a need for attention, but we just never know when someone may or if they may act on a situation. So I would, like we started this conversation, having that direct, do you have a plan? Do you have thoughts of suicide? And find a way to direct them to some help, whether it's a clinician, whether it's a coach, a mental health professional, if they're still school age, a counselor, someone, a trusted figure in their life, but I would ensure that they speak to someone to make sure that they get the help and support they need in a timely fashion. Joseph, did you want to add to that?
Dr. D, you said it so eloquently and thoroughly. I have nothing to add. And those who know me, when I have nothing to say, it's been good.
Oh, I do have one more before we come to a close. I'm sorry, as a caregiver, husband, father, grandfather, and uncle, what message do you most want to pass down to future generations?
Mhm.
Well, I think for me, and I'm glad that Bill put this slide up because that tied right into Dr.
Yeah.
D's response. And it ties into what I said about the conversation guide as well. It talks about communicating, showing the person that you care, trying to find them a safe space, trying to find them to help. All of that's ingrained in that. You're not going to be able to force them. And if they really are in a manic state, you're not going to be able to do much. You're going to have to get professional help. And I would suggest that if one is going to make the call for professional help, that they let it be known when they call that 911 number that the person is experiencing a mental health crisis, because that's going to mitigate the situation whereby either the persons who come get hurt, and that has occurred, or the person, your loved one, will be hurt. I think that what I would like to communicate is just this: recognizing that one, mental illness exists. And your family, you, your family members, your colleagues and friends, you all aren't the only one who experience it. As I pointed out, there are 3 out of 5 people, what I said, 3 out of 5 people were experienced it. No, let me go back to the statistics. 3 people attempt suicide every minute in the United States. 1 in 5 high school students seriously consider attempting suicide. So it is somewhat on an epidemic proportion. So you are not alone. I say to get involved, educate yourself on there about what's out there. And and I see that Jennifer James, who I know, has asked a question: are there any organizations for youth? Yes, both the Mass Association of Mental Health has an organization. Uh, the Samaritans have an organization for that they address for youth. They have all types of workshops. They have focus groups. They have safe spaces for youth. They even that's why they went to Jennifer. They went to trying to meet young people where they are. So they have the texting. Or our young people like to text, and they have people on these support lines in order to address them in that way. So there's a number of different entities, and I can't speak for nationally because not every state is as engaged as Massachusetts might be. But Samaritans is in most communities. The NAMI is a national organization. So those would be 2 organizations that I would say, Jennifer, whether it's youth and or any person that might be experiencing mental health crisis, or if you are a caregiver for one who might be experiencing it, I would contact Samaritans and or NAMI, which are both national organizations. And if you're in Massachusetts, you also would have the Massachusetts Association for Mental Health.
And I could just add, Jennifer, if you Google Black therapist, because that was the situation I was in, I was trying to find not only a Black therapist, I was trying to find a Black therapist for a person who was part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they would only see a therapist that can relate to that community. So it's very important that our therapists are culturally competent. So there are organizations like Growth Therapy, BetterHelp, Psychology Today. If you intentionally Google Black therapists for youth, you'll see some organizations that will come up for you. So take a look at that. Before we end, before I turn it back over to you, Bill, I just want to again say, if this is triggering, if this is a situation where it sounds familiar, or you know someone in your family, someone in your circle that you think may be in a situation of suicide or thoughts, please give them the information. The hotline is 988. It's a national number. If this relates to you as well, after this call, please call 988. Please call someone, speak to someone, get the help that you need. And as Joseph said, you are not alone. He gave the statistics about suicide and thoughts of suicide. It is a very frequent occurrence. As Bill said in the beginning, this is a national crisis, and we want to make sure that we are kinder, more thoughtful, more compassionate, so we can help those around us, so we can combat this issue, because our brain is an organ that requires attention. So I just want to say thank you, Bill and Karis, for allowing us to have this conversation today on the last day of, which is National Suicide Prevention Month. Bill, I turn it back to you.
Yes, I want to let Joey give some last thoughts before I close out.
Joseph?
He couldn't help himself. See,
Joseph?
folks, you got to know that that's family, because he went back to how I was known growing up as Joey. So he can get away with that in terms of so fine, but none of you can. Karis can as well, because she's called me that most of all her life. Um, Again, I just want to say thank you. This conversation is great, and I had the pleasure of getting an opportunity to meet Dr. D. You're an inspiration. You're an extraordinary, and I hope that this won't be the last time that we have an opportunity to interact. As I said, this is my ministry. There's no way I can get away from it. I've created a foundation where I'm trying to make sure that information gets out. I, I I use my resources in order to support. I say to folks, yeah, I'm supporting organizations that are in this space, both now as well well as in my will in other places, because I want to make sure that folks in the future have an opportunity to receive the information and the treatment that is necessary as we go forward. So uh, I think conversations like this are important. I hope that we have provided you with at least some baseline information. I directed you towards where you can get resources. I don't consider myself uh, an expert, but I have lived experience, so that provides me some degree of importance in this space, because I can talk about it from a personal experience. It's not from reading a book, it's not from hearing about it. I experienced it, and I think there was one person that who did ask the question here that which my niece read for Winfari, who asked about the one about how do I treat for a sibling? Speak to them, reach out, try to encourage them to get help, go with them, take them to where they may need to be. Don't try to drag them, don't try to force them, but try to encourage them to get the help. So again, Bill, Karis, thank you for inviting me to join Dr. D in this program this evening.
Well, we are blessed to have you, dear sir. Again, I want to thank Dr. D for hosting this event. Dr. D will be back next month as PDA presents our breast cancer awareness presentation. We'll also be joined by special guest panelists Kim Nesbitt Good and Tina Graham. If you don't know who Tina Graham is, she's the godmother of urban comedy who was recently diagnosed. So we look forward to that next month. In the meantime, if you know someone who's suffering, have them call 988. Please go to the PDA page on the LinkedIn platform. Follow us for alignment. On that note, we're out. We appreciate your support. Stay tuned. Great things coming. Please check out Dr. D on the debrief, Conversations with Karis, and Alicia Hills, the career girl, will be back with us next month. I'm Bill Smith from Destination Management Connections. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.
Night, everyone.
Have a great evening. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, attendees.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care, everyone.